This video was made possible through the support of my patrons. As Doctor Who has been grappling with production issues and an erratic release schedule, resulting in just 20 episodes over the past 3 years, it's kind of mad to look at the yearly output of a company like Big Finish and see an avalanche of releases. This isn't even all of them. While I've been reviewing Big Finish releases since 2021, 2022 was the year where I tried to be more complete and comprehensive and even started buying boxed copies. I think it's when you see these releases piled high that you really start to understand why this corner of Doctor Who has such a reputation for being impenetrable or ultra niche. These were just most of the releases from last year at Big Finish, let alone their back catalogue of over 20 years. I think Big Finish saw this perception as well and are taking steps to be more approachable, with 2022 being the start of a new phase for the company. 2021 saw the end of their monthly range, and now we're getting a combination of explicitly standalone collections, brand new story arcs, or shorter form multi-box set releases with new companions. Obviously it will take a while for the dust to settle on whether or not these experiments were worthwhile, but it's admirable that they're trying. But because there's so much here, and because there are people in my audience who want to get into modern Big Finish but don't know where to start, I wanted to do a retrospective breakdown over almost everything Doctor Who related that Big Finish released in 2022, culminating in a ranking where I give you my 10 recommendations of must-listen sets. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to go through all of the Doctors in chronological order, and then go through some of the side series and the other ranges that Big Finish offer. So if there's a particular Doctor that you resonate with, or a corner of the Doctor Who universe that you want to learn more about, there are timestamps in the description, there are chapters on this YouTube video, check them out and hop around. But as for this video proper, we'll go in Doctor order, which gives us...
Excellent wine, my lady. Most excellent and indicative of your general taste, if I may say so, madam.
The first Doctor, and also the second Doctor, easily have the least amount of Big Finish back catalogues out of the classic incarnations, mainly due to the understandable handicap of the vast majority of the actors from that era no longer being with us, which is fair, I guess. However, in 2022, Big Finish pushed the boat out on a brand new full cast relaunch of the first Doctor with a proof of concept box set called The Outlaws, a two-part release which sees Stephen Noonan as the Doctor and Lauren Cornelius filling in for Dodo Chaplet, a Doctor companion pairing rarely explored in the TV series but is put to great use here. The Outlaws, the story, not the box set, is a glorious historical romp, which sees the farcical comedy of something like the Romans and the intriguing time travel manipulation of the Time Meddler being blended together for one of my favourite single Big Finish stories of the year, with Rufus Hound playing the meddling monk to wonderful campy effect. Set in 13th century Lincoln, this story sees the Doctor getting mad drunk, Dodo getting involved in a knockoff Robin Hood troupe, and some of the wittiest dialogue that writer Lisbeth Miles can offer. But if you prefer your first Doctor stories a bit more experimental and in the realm of sci-fi, we also get The Miniaturist by Lizzie Hopley, which sees the acting return of Annette Badland as the titular, godlike antagonist, which seems to be everyone else's favourite from the set. I love The Miniaturist, but at only 2 parts, it does feel like it's over before it can properly begin, though I think the phrase burning brightly but burning quickly does apply here. Thankfully, The Outlaws proved enough of a success for Big Finish to continue their first Doctor and Dodo range with the recent release of The Demon Song in 2023, starting off a brand new story arc which looks set to unfold over subsequent releases. Okay, I want to take a moment just to get some admin out of the way real quick. So firstly, thanks so much to Joel from Poorly Aged Who for putting together the thumbnail for this video. I'll put a link to his social medias in the description below. He takes commissions, check him out, hire him. Secondly, I want to give a shout out to my Patreon. You're able to support me through Patreon there. You can get perks and early access to videos such as the one that you're watching now. There are different tiers where you can get access to a Mr. Titus Discord server, get a shout out in the credits, and it's one of the best ways to support me. However, if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. Just hit that like button, it really helps me out, and also leave any comment down below to appease the almighty YouTube algorithm. Things like comments and likes, they go a really long way. And lastly, you saw that avalanche of Big Finish releases at the beginning of the video. Last year I tried to get as many hard copies of Big Finish releases as possible, and now for this video I'm putting those up on eBay. I'm selling them on eBay at below the normal retail price, and I've taken the shrink wrap off them because I don't want these to be for collectors or people who are going to scalp them. I want these releases to go to people who are maybe interested in them or want to check them out or listen to them, as a cheaper alternative to get into modern Big Finish. In the description below there'll be a link to my eBay where these items are going to go on sale. You can check them out, get a good deal, and all of the hard copies of Big Finish releases that I talk about in this video are going up on that eBay, with the exception of the 9th Doctor ones. Those have already been claimed. Anyway, that's all from me. Enjoy the rest of the video. Now, on to the next incarnation.
Exile? Ha! You lot couldn't exile a cheese roll!
Much like his predecessor, the Second Doctor hasn't had much of a Big Finish history in terms of full cast audio dramas, but that changed in 2022 with the Beyond Wargames box set, which looked set to canonise the Season 6B fan theory, that the Doctor was saved from his enforced exile at the end of the Wargames and made to do missions for the Time Lords, which led to his appearance in The Two Doctors. A bold experiment, and we also have one of Patrick Troughton's sons, Michael Troughton, filling in his father's boots incredibly well. Like, seriously, it's a wonderful impression and a great performance which adds a lot of credibility to the box set. Beyond Wargames as a box set properly, however, is solid. It's definitely unambiguous about being a Chapter 1. Nicholas Briggs directs the set and co-writes the first story, The Final Beginning, so it plays the premise a bit safe. Like, this is exactly what you think an opening chapter of a Season 6B box set would be, but it lays some really interesting groundwork, including but not limited to the return of the Daleks after their final end on Skaro, and the introduction of Raven, played by Emma Noakes, who is assigning the Doctor his missions. Wrath of the Ice Warriors is fun, seeing John Coleshaw return as the Brigadier and Katie Manning hamming it up as an Ice Warrior.
I am Martian. I was born for war.
But I think the jury is still out as to whether or not this arc will add up to anything in the long run. Oddly enough, the most compelling Second Doctor release of the year was his companion chronicle set, The Second Doctor Volume 3, narrated by Fraser Hines and Wendy Padbury, who played companions Jamie and Zoe respectively. This was a really strong, dynamic quartet of stories, which opens with The Death of the Daleks by George Mann, which takes place immediately after the events of The Evil of the Daleks, but before the Tomb of the Cybermen, and sees the Doctor grappling with the guilt of committing a genocide against the Daleks. It's a really atmospheric and introspective story with wonderful imagery of a Dalek ghost haunting a war-torn battlefield. The Phantom Piper by Martin Day is a great story which tests the levels of trust between the Second Doctor and Jamie. The Prince of Denmark is a brilliant comedy which sees Zoe becoming a companion to the meddling monk, once again played by Rufus Hound, and The Deepest Tragedian by Penelope Faith sees Zoe befriend an amnesiac actor who has been sent on a mission revolving around the Second Doctor. I won't spoil it, but it's a really affecting, dramatic two-hander. Anyway, some really good stories for the Second Doctor, but it's not over yet, as we'll be seeing the Second Doctor again in our next segment.
Yes. Well, I'm afraid the console got a bit of an overload of, something.
The Third Doctor range from Big Finish is a brilliant and consistently good set of releases, like a comfort blanket where Tim Treloar and an assortment of other wonderful impressionists lull you back into the 1970s again. 2021 was always going to be a really hard act to follow, and I think 2022's releases are solid, but not the peak of the range. While previous Third Doctor box sets have had a range of stories, the mission statement of 2022 set appears to have been attempts to emulate the infamous 7-parters of the early 70s. Admirable on paper, but it means that if this story is not working with you, then that's £20 poorly spent. Thankfully, The Annihilators tries to give the audience plenty of bang for its buck. Initially sold as an epic 7-parter akin to a Season 7 story with the Third Doctor, the Brigadier, and even Liz Shaw played by Caroline John's daughter Daisy Ashford, A few weeks before its release, Big Finish updated the cover art to include the second Doctor and an aged Jamie. That's right, it's a multi-Doctor story. Michael Troughton made his Big Finish debut here as the second Doctor, already midway through his Beyond Wargames arc apparently, as he's got an older Jamie as a companion, clearly something yet to be properly introduced into his own range at the time of writing. The Annihilators really is propped up by its terrific cast, as its ho-hum alien invasion story can't really sustain the story's 3-hour length. Still, Fraser Hines is terrific as an older Jamie and has brilliant banter with Liz Shaw, and I think the second Doctor's antics with the titular Annihilators almost upstages the third Doctor, though Tim Treloar is brilliant at recapturing Jon Pertwee's swagger. I think that Kaleidoscope, a 6-parter, so slightly shorter than the Annihilators, is fun, but for very different reasons. I think the alien threat is far more interesting, with Garen Howell playing a naive but endearing alien with telekinetic powers who is here to try and save humanity. I also think that Sadie Miller as Sarah Jane gets a really good showing here as well, not to mention the Brigadier's hero moment is brilliantly done towards the story's climax, the Brigadier here played by John Colshaw. I think even just 6 parts is still way too long for these stories though, but I liked the way that Kaleidoscope played with its structure, literally changing theme song and protagonist midway through. It's great. Oh, and we even get Christopher Naylor playing Harry Sullivan pre-season 12, though he's obviously skirting around the edges of the plot, making sure he does not meet the Doctor, causing a space-time trap or something. Like I said, these are solid box sets, but I think earlier third Doctor sets are better jumping on points. They're just more varied and more focused, though these 2022 sets do a great job at emulating the format, the sound, and the feel of season 7 to season 11 of Doctor Who. But as far as I'm concerned, Volume 8's The Devil's Hoofprints is the high bar for this range so far. Next up.
Wizards are my favorite. Ooh, I do like a good wizard.
Tom Baker holds the distinction of being the longest serving Doctor in the show's history in regards to being the incumbent when the show was in production, with 7 seasons. So with that context, it's amazing that in 2022, Tom Baker had his 11th season of audio stories. It's genuinely wild that there's more Big Finish 4th Doctor than actual TV 4th Doctor, and that margin is just growing by the year. As I write this script, the first half of season 12 was released, and you can pre-order series 13 as well. I've not listened to prior seasons, so I can't compare season 11 to those, but in 2022, the 4th Doctor did not get off to the best start, with Solo, a box set that takes place midway through season 14, after The Deadly Assassin but before The Hand of Fear. We've got Blood of the Time Lords by Timothy X. Attack. Now, I genuinely adore Timothy's Big Finish output. He might actually be my favourite writer for the company. But this was a massive miss, as Blood of the Time Lords is just a bad remake of The Deadly Assassin, where the Doctor is summoned to Gallifrey, the Master is there played by a boring transphobe, and he has to go into the Matrix to solve a deadly plot. It's wild that if this takes place mid-season 14, the Doctor almost had back-to-back identical adventures on the same planet, with the same antagonist, with a similar resolution, and it's never addressed how this has happened already. It's not just blatant similarities that bring the story down, it's just a bad story with zero intrigue and no compelling conflicts or characters. It's like The Deadly Assassin, but with everything that made The Deadly Assassin good just absent. And the follow-up, The Ravencliff Witch by David Llewellyn, is fine, but it's just a decent approximation of Philip Hinchcliffe's supernatural horror stories. Era appropriate, but it's nothing spectacular. I can't really remember much about it, to be honest, and that's a shame because season 12 of the 4th Doctor range brings a character back from this story and they become a full-time companion. So it turns out you have to remember this story. Now, these seasons get released in 2 parts. Solo is a really easy skip, but the 9... now we're talking. This was terrific. If you listen to any 4th Doctor from this year, this is the set. It starts off great as we've got The Dreams of Avarice by Guy Adams, a madcap caper which sees the Doctor, still travelling solo, face off against the renegade, kleptomaniac Time Lord, the Nine, played with such glee by John Heffernan. It's such a fun romp with one of Big Finish's best cliffhangers of the year. Truly bonkers. Shell Shock by Simon Barnard and Paul Morris is basically the opposite in style and tone, but not in quality, as we see the 4th Doctor in World War I land the the TARDIS behind German lines, as the very soil the soldiers are fighting on is turning the Western Front into an even more harrowing experience for the armies. Also, Alicia Ambrose Bailey plays one of the best surrogate companions in a story this year. Now, you can get The Dreams of Avarice and Shell Shock individually, but I recommend picking up the full Season 11 Part 2 box set because it also includes the two-parter Peak Season by Lisbeth Miles, a really fun abstract story which sees the Fourth Doctor go on a mini adventure with Alice in Wonderland illustrator Mervyn Peake. Honestly, I don't remember too much from this one. Big Finish released so much in a year that I can't recall everything, but I do remember this being a great and fun finale to Season 11. The year started shaky for Tom Baker, but it ended incredibly strong, and performance-wise, the man has not lost a step despite being in his mid-80s. Tom Baker is the Doctor. Next.
Of all the doctors I get to be you, the one that makes me want to live the most.
Now, 2022 was a celebratory year for the Fifth Doctor. It was the 40th anniversary of his debut season, Season 19. So to celebrate this, Big Finish released two box sets entitled 40. Now, when you think of the Fifth Doctor's era, what do you think of? The return of Omega? The new era of the Cybermen? Well, according to Big Finish, they wanted to celebrate the Fifth Doctor by doing a sequel to The Tomb of the Cybermen.
That makes sense!
Yeah, so Matt Fitton's The Secrets of Telos sees the Fifth Doctor land on the rocket that just left Telos at the end of The Tomb of the Cybermen, and then we get a sequel to an era of the Cybermen that has nothing to do with this incarnation. It's an odd choice. We also have God of War by Sarah Grishella, which sees the Fifth Doctor face off against the Ice Warriors, a race the Fifth Doctor never encountered.
That also makes sense!
Now, don't misunderstand me, it's not inherently an issue that these stories aren't paying more direct homage to the Fifth Doctor's era, it's just such a strange set of villains and settings in what is billing itself to be an anniversary event, and the potential is there. The framing device has the Fifth Doctor travelling down his own personal history, which also allows him to be paired with a variety of companions from his tenure, but this framing device chiefly manifests itself as him feeling guilty about the foreknowledge of Adric's death, and yes, we are doing this again. Genuinely, put all of the Fifth Doctor's Big Finish stories on a dartboard, close your eyes and throw, and there's an incredibly high chance you'll land on a story that revolves around the Fifth Doctor's guilt and mourning over Adric. One of those sets was The Lost Resort, which not only did this significantly better, but was only released a year before. It's so played out at this point, and neither story in 40 was compelling even on its own merits. Now, Volume 2 was such a marked improvement, but it's hard to recommend because you likely need to listen to Volume 1 first, which I can't recommend you do in good conscience. 42, which is basically a single six-parter called The Auton Infinity, written by Tim Foley, feels like the celebratory event the whole story should have been. We get the Fifth Doctor travelling with Tegan and Turlough, John Coleshaw plays triple duty, voicing Chameleon, the Master, and the Brigadier, and he's so good in this box set. There's even a lovely cameo and epilogue at the end. Yes, it's an Auton story, which is not something you'd associate with the Fifth Doctor, but it's fine because it's a genuinely great six-parter which showcases some cool new applications and abilities for the Nestene, including a potential origin story. It's really good, and it also includes one of my favourite scenes of the year, where Peter Davison gives a full-blown monologue detailing what makes the Fifth Doctor so special. I genuinely got teary-eyed listening to it. Minor spoilers for later on in this video, when I do my top 10 box sets, this just missed out. This was number 11. I don't think the story arc as a whole was a success, but I do recommend 40 Volume 2. Just understand that there are some references to the previous box set which might go over your head, but you're not missing much in my opinion. Anyway, who's next? Oh, it's him.
Travel to the stars, Jupiter and Mars, with our brave TARDIS crew. All of time and space is a happy place with the Sixth Doctor Who.
This was the year of Colin Baker. The Sixth Doctor, hands down, had the most releases dedicated to him, even when not including compilation sets, which we'll talk about later. From alternate timelines, lost stories, to a new status quo, Sixth Doctor fans were well catered to in 2022. But it wasn't all smooth sailing, unfortunately. Let's start with the bad. The Unbound range made its return in 2022. These are what-if alternative universe experiments which were the cornerstone of Big Finish's earlier output. The premise of these new sets is great. What if the Fourth Doctor decided he did have the right in Genesis of the Daleks, and his actions started the Time War early, prompting him to regenerate into the Doctor of War, who's played by Colin Baker, after a wonderful prologue which sees Tom Baker, Sadie Miller and Christopher Naylor lay the groundwork. We're thrust into an alternate time war, and over the course of 2 box sets, nothing interesting happens. I'm sorry, but Doctor of War Genesis and Doctor of War Destiny did nothing for me. It's a brilliant premise which I feel was utterly squandered by boring stories with no connective tissue and an unwillingness to even establish what a time war where the Daleks got an early advantage because they have the time ring, what that looks like. All the interesting stuff happens between stories. The War Doctor becomes president of Gallifrey. Off-screen, the Warrior forges an alliance with the Master. Also off-screen, there's a new Romana in the Time War, who the War Doctor never meets. We get awesome actors like Sanjeev Bhaskar as the new Barusa, inspired casting, and he has nothing to do. These stories leave all of the interesting stuff off the table, leaving the listener with crumbs. Now, I think Destiny is the better of the two, with an alternate what-if version of the Face of Evil, where it's the Master who lands on Leela's planet instead of the Doctor, with a really dark ending which seems to be a cliffhanger, but then it's just the Doctor and the Master afterwards with no follow-up. It ends with a full-blown cliffhanger, and it never gets resolved or followed up on, or even hinted at. Like, I want to know what happens at the end of that story. Now, Geoffrey Beavis is astonishingly good as the Master, and Colin Baker is terrific in this role as well, trying to elevate the material as this new Doctor of War. But the stories, the setting, and everything else, it's just not there to utilise these actors effectively. These Unbound sets are, without question, the biggest disappointments of the year for me. And I'm only annoyed because the premise was terrific, but the Doctor of War sets were directionless and that premise was squandered. A real shame. Also a shame, The Mind of Hodiak, one of Big Finish's most well-publicised releases of 2022, due to it being a lost Doctor Who script from Russell T Davies that he wrote in the 1980s. It was found again during the watch-along of The Runaway Bride during lockdown, and Big Finish quickly announced a adaptation. And it was pretty boring. Obviously, Russell T Davies would go on to write bigger and better things, but this was just a pretty generic Douglas Adams pastiche. Not terrible, but not really worth picking up. I barely remember anything about it. Now, let's get to the good stuff. The new Sixth Doctor range, which sees a new companion, Hebe Harrison, played by superstar Ruth Madeley. This TARDIS team, comprised of the Sixth Doctor, Hebe and Mel, played by Bonnie Langford, was such a welcome surprise in 2022, with longtime writer Jacqueline Rayner overseeing the story arc, starting with Waterworld, an aquatic trio of stories introducing marine biologist Hebe. And these stories are great, fun, and rip-roaring Doctor Who. Hebe is a great, frequently sardonic companion who starts off with all of her emotional walls up, but they're eventually whittled down by an empathetic Sixth Doctor and a really friendly, awkward, but compassionate Mel. Even the TARDIS takes a shine to Hebe, changing its interior to include more ramps for her wheelchair. Hebe goes on a great journey of self-discovery across the box set, as she has to acclimatise to time and space, understand other people's needs and boundaries across a variety of stories, a base under siege, a doomsday story, and a deep-sea horror adventure. All characters get great stuff to do. It's just the full package, and a great setup for the next box set, Purity Undreamed. Now, this takes place predominantly in the modern day and introduces a new potential companion in Patricia, played by Imogen Stubbs. Now, I won't dive too deeply into what happens in the box set because so much of it hinges on the final episode, Chronomancer by Robert Valentine, which has the most jaw-dropping ending with incredible social commentary that is going to propel the range forward into its final installment in 2023, Purity Unleashed. I won't spoil what happens here, I already did a video on that astonishing ending, but my god, I am hyped to see this story conclude. The rest of the set is no slouch, but my god was Chronomancer such a sucker punch. The year of Colin Baker goes on and on and on, I guess. This is Colin Baker's world, we're just living in it. Anyway, next up.
Angry bins. Angry bins of hate. Soft on the inside, crunchy on the outside. Sergeant Pepperpot's Lonely Hate Club Band.
The Seventh Doctor has had a slow reintroduction to Big Finish recently. Lockdown restrictions and other work has prevented Sylvester McCoy from playing the Doctor, so when he made his triumphant return in 2022, he did it in a pretty understated way. We've got the box set, Silver and Ice, a fun duo of stories which sees the Seventh Doctor and Mel encounter the Cybermen and return to Ribos. Now, the most interesting thing about this set is that it takes place in the final days of the Seventh Doctor and Mel and starts to showcase the more scheming and manipulative version of the character that we would see on the TV screens during the Andrew Cartmel era. Outside of that, we've got some fun stories, particularly Bad Day in Tinseltown by Dan Starkey, who is doing some fun homages to Douglas Adams, and the Cybermen are implemented really well. It's a breezy two-parter. We've also got the four-parter, The Rebos Inheritance by Jonathan Barnes, and I think this story was a bit lacking for me, because I've never watched the Rebos experiment from the Key to Time saga. I've not watched any of the Key to Time saga, I'm sorry, I'm a fake fan. I thought the world building of this feudal primitive society was really interesting, but that was kind of it. McCoy and Langford are great, and overall it's a decent fun box set. I feel like I'm underselling it though. I apologise, but I did enjoy it. Unfortunately, the only other Seventh Doctor set was a large step down. Sullivan and Cross AWOL sees the Seventh Doctor, travelling alone, come to Earth with Harry Sullivan and Naomi Cross from UNIT becoming short-term companions. For those of you who don't know, Naomi Cross is played by Eleanor Crooks, and she's been part of the UNIT range for a while. She's even in line to be a Fourth Doctor companion in the near future. So London Orbital is a Harry Sullivan origin story where we learn what his first days at UNIT entailed in an enchanting narrative where mystical elves are living in the London Underground. However, it's just not that interesting. It's got a predictable villain, it's a bog standard story where both sides are equally bad, and a repetitive structure where the Seventh Doctor disappears every 30 minutes, then returns to exposit and insult Harry Sullivan. Sylvester McCoy is great, but I felt like it was a waste of his considerable talents. Scream of the Daleks by Lisa McMullen, on the other hand, is better, but at 2 parts, it's way too short to make the most of its story, where the team find a corpse in 1969, and the person had been killed by an energy weapon, so the Doctor and Naomi go back in time to find out what happened, leaving Harry in 1969 having to contend with festival goers. Surprise, it's the Daleks. After all, they are in the title and they're on the cover, but the story still treats this like a big reveal in the story's only cliffhanger. This is a 2-parter, and it spells the death knell for the pacing. It's the first outing for the Seventh Doctor and the Daleks for years, and it was a bit disappointing because they didn't get to do much, and the Seventh Doctor really felt like he was on autopilot, just saying, "Oh, evil from the dawn of time, malevolent blobs, angry bins." And because the events of the story have to be compressed into 2 episodes, it's so convoluted, and by the time the audience and the main characters have figured out what's happening, it's time for the credits to roll. It doesn't even make the most of having Harry and Naomi involved. You could replace the characters with anyone and nothing would change, which is a shame. Honestly, the Seventh Doctor did not have a great year, compared to other Doctors at least, which is a shame. Anyway, next up. The Eighth Doctor range has become a nearly impenetrable saga for the uninitiated. We've had complex arcs which have led into each other, from Dark Eyes up to Stranded, which concluded in early 2022. I did not listen to Stranded, and I think even Big Finish understood that the Eighth Doctor needed a clean slate. So we've got some standalone box sets which see Paul McGann reunite with Liv and Helen, played by Nicola Walker and Hattie Morahan respectively. We got 2 box sets in 2 months, which even formed a complete cover. Perfect. Let's start with What Lies Inside, which starts with Paradox of the Daleks by John Dorney, which is, without question, the best Dalek story of 2022 from Big Finish. It's an incredible, complicated but not obtusely so, base under siege story which sees the Daleks taking their first steps in the Time War with a blissfully unaware 8th Doctor trying to ensure that his friends survive on a spaceship meddling with time travel technology. It's witty, it's bonkers, it has twists that the audience find out at the same time as the characters, and then the characters draw attention to it. The Daleks are great, the cast are having a ball, and it's so deftly structured that I never felt like I was being left behind, even when it was playing with previously established events. I adored Paradox of the Daleks, and I almost feel sorry for the follow-up, The Dolby Spook by Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle, because it's almost unfair to compare. But to its credit, it's a light-hearted horror jaunt which sees the Doctor, Liv and Helen visit a remote farmhouse on the Isle of Man which is haunted by Jeff the Mongoose, an actual paranormal event from the 1930s. It's a fun time, but I also liked how it does not neglect the family at the heart of the event, recognising and dealing with the fact that many paranormal stories are often accompanied by troubled and hurt families, particularly the children trapped in those situations. It was a quality hour-long story, it showcased Liv and Helen really well, even to someone who has never really listened to them as Big Finish companions before. What Lies Inside is such an easy recommendation, and it's great to be able to dive into an 8th Doctor set without having to read a whole thesis to get caught up. Then, a month later, we got Connections, with a trilogy of wonderful stories. Here Lies Drax by John Dorney was a rip-roaringly fun caper bolstered by an incredible performance from Shane Ritchie as the Doctor's old friend, Drax. It opens with a hilarious funeral and ends with some revelations and an intense standoff. Love it, love it, love it. The Love Vampires by James Kettle slows things down somewhat with an intimate horror as the Doctor, Liv and Helen land on a spaceship which is being besieged by vampires. Honest to God vampires. We get some wonderful insights into the Doctor's past, some great character building into what haunts Liv and Helen the most, and it's a genuinely atmospheric hour of audio. And lastly, we've got Alby's Angels by Roy Gill, which sees Helen zapped from 2020 Soho to the 1960s by a weeping angel and runs into her brother, who she knows will soon be met with a horrible fate. Alby's Angels is such a profoundly moving story that it's difficult for me to describe it without sounding like I'm just throwing superlatives at it. Alby's Angels instantly ranks as one of the best episodes of Doctor Who in any medium, with an ending that destroyed me. I cried. It was both profoundly sad, but also really affirming and so very beautiful. I'll leave it there, but my god, I don't know what favours Paul McGann did in terms of karmic justice, but getting two 10 out of 10 box sets back to back, what a year for 8. Also, I will say that there was another 8th Doctor set this year, which I do own, The Further Adventures of Charlotte Pollard. This takes place between what is colloquially referred to as Season 1 and Season 2 of the 8th Doctor Adventures with Charlie, but I've not finished Season 1 yet, so I did not get around to listening to it. Anyway, a new challenger approaches.
Do it for once! Finally, go on! It doesn't matter anymore, just do it if you must! Kill me! Kill me!
In 2021, my favourite box set of the year was the first from Big Finish's new War Doctor range, The War Doctor Begins Forged in Fire. Jonathan Carley's debut, filling in the huge shoes of John Hurt, was such an assured and confident outing, and I could not wait to see where the adventures went next, because I love Big Finish's Time War adventures. The War Doctor Begins range started as it meant to go on, because both Battlegrounds and He Who Fights with Monsters this year are two of my favourite box sets of 2022, with the company putting its top tier talent on board with these stories, starting with Battlegrounds, which initially decides to avoid the Time War altogether by giving us a standard Doctor Who adventure, with the War Doctor visiting a coastal village with a companion, Layla Bridge, played by Emma Campbell-Jones. The Keeper of Light by Phil Mulryne plays with expectations by giving this tragic Doctor an adventure that would be commonplace with all of his other incarnations, whilst also knowing that it can't possibly last, and that eventually the curtain will be drawn and it's back to the most devastating war in the universe. Even in the meta sense with the casting of Ken Bones, the Time Lord General, here he's a normal holidaymaker. Emma Campbell-Jones played Cass in The Night of the Doctor, the companion that the Doctor could never travel with. Or maybe not? God damn it, Big Finish. It's a terrific, twisting tale with a killer ending. We've also got Temesis by Rossa McPhillips, which does a great job at expanding the Time War further by teaming the War Doctor up with the Thals on the titular Temesis ship. It's a more conventional Time War story in terms of its setting and its structure, however its characters are terrifically textured and the voice cast is wonderful. There's only a couple of scenes involving the Daleks in this serial, but they absolutely kill it where it counts. And lastly, we have Rewind by Timothy X. Attack, and it's my favourite Big Finish story of 2022. I'm not even going to be coy about this. Rewind is an astonishing hour of sci-fi which centres around Ignis, who lives on the planet Lasuna. The planet is caught in the middle of a time loop, and every citizen is aware of it. It's been 400 days, 400 loops, and every day sees the destruction of the planet by a new breed of Daleks called Berserkers, which are more like a massive storm cloud which devours the world than your conventional Dalek armada. Ignis, played by Sarah Moss, giving, in my opinion, the best guest performance of the year, finds the War Doctor in a castle trying to find a way to save the civilization. And it's just great, with an ending that destroys me. Oh, and Jonathan Carley stepping into the shoes of the late great John Hurt is amazing as always. While Battleground was 3 standalone stories, the follow-up was He Who Fights with Monsters, a single 3-part epic written by Robert Valentine. Basically, the War Doctor is sent on an assassination mission to take down another rebel Time Lord who may be about to end the conflict by wiping out both sides. The Daleks are also searching, and they've sent a hunter-killer Dalek voiced by Jason Burrells, a calculating, walking, and independent-thinking breed of Dalek. I love the varied approach that you can get with a multi-story box set, but with He Who Fights with Monsters, it allows for a true Time War epic, which is a cross between Doctor Who and Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, taking place as the war is reaching an endgame, and we find out what happens to certain important Daleks and other Time Lord players, but to elaborate any further would be getting into spoilers. I also think that Jonathan Carley, who has been terrific so far, does his best work in this box set. It's a great listen, with great potential to be thematically built upon in future War Doctor sets, should they choose to go in that direction. Thankfully, we are getting more in 2023, and I'm so excited to dive back into this dark corner of the show. The War Doctor sets are just terrific, do not skip out on these. Anyway, let's move on to some more fantastic sets.
You might have guessed I'm a traveller in time, but in this case, I was just looking for a nice spot for a picnic. That's all, bit of hush. And I knew the ninth moon of Salvation had these gorgeous forests, the very essence of tranquility.
2022 was the second year of Christopher Eccleston's return as the Ninth Doctor for Big Finish. We saw the finale of his first season and the first 3 box sets of his second season. So we'll be starting with the season 1 finale, Old Friends, which was initially sold as a Ninth Doctor and Brigadier reunion in the marketing, and that did happen. However, on the day of release, Big Finish updated the cover and released a trailer revealing that the Cybermen would be returning as well, which was wild. Anyway, the box set starts with a Calm Before the Storm story, Fond Farewell by David K. Barnes, which sees the Doctor get invited to the funeral of his friend Flynn Beckett. However, the services that are offered by the company Fond Farewell has Flynn able to attend his own ceremony, allowing his friends and family to properly say their goodbyes. It's a really interesting concept and it starts really strong, but then it becomes a whodunit mystery, and I don't think the characters were developed enough to make it a compelling listen. Not a bad release, and I know that people like Davis, for example, will fight to the death for this story, and I appreciate that. But for me, I don't think its ending was earned. However, things quickly escalate with the two-part finale written by Roy Gill, Way of the Buryman and the Fourth Generation, where the Ninth Doctor arrives in Scotland and meets an old Lethbridge Stewart, played by John Culshaw, and a young Sam Bishop, played by Warren Brown from the Unit box sets. It's a really awesome finale, which sees the Doctor discovering Cybermen built inside the Fourth Bridge, a monument built on the backs of the workers, many of whom died to make it a reality. It's a great finale for the Cybermen as well, as there's some brilliant and creepy set pieces, particularly one where they hijack a train. It has some of my favourite scenes of the first season, but I do think there's a lot of missed opportunity with the meeting of the Brigadier. It's great that this incarnation got to interact with his oldest friend, much like Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor did retroactively, but they leave all the dramatic potential of a post-war Doctor meeting the Brigadier, of all people, on the table. It feels like both the Brigadier and Sam Bishop are only here because they're recognisable characters, as opposed to having specific, proactive roles in the adventure. Now, that having been said, in all other areas, this finale fires on all cylinders, taking Scottish history and its part in the Industrial Revolution and combining it with the Cybermen body horror. It's been a quiet year for the Cybermen in Big Finish, but this was a great box set for them. Now, for Season 2 of the Ninth Doctor Adventures, we've got a trilogy of trilogies, starting with Back to Earth. Station to Station by Robert Valentine is a great opener, which sees the Doctor and Saffron, played by Indigo Griffiths, trapped in an alternate dimension on a train station being pursued by a fairy tale, a Rumpelstiltskin-like creature called the Griminy Gru, voiced by Ian Bartholomew. It's a great, creepy story with some lovely character beats, great themes throughout, and a killer confrontation scene. Highly recommended. Next up, The False Dimitri by Sarah Gricella, which sees the Doctor in early 17th century Russia and stopping an alien invasion attempt where a robot army is hoping to take over through Dmitry Ivanovich. Honestly, while I can't name any bad Ninth Doctor Big Finish stories, I just don't really seem to gravitate towards the more historical ones, but I'm sure this is mainly down to personal preference, though in The False Dimitri I did love the dynamic between the Doctor and one of the Tsar's carers, Oksana, played by Katie Britton. There are some cool twists, and I like just how hard it commits to the sci-fi trappings as the episode goes through with some pretty bonkers ideas. And also, for transparency's sake, I listened to this story whilst I was on the plane to mine and my wife's honeymoon, so I might not have given it a proper chance, and I'll try and find time to re-listen to it in the near future. Also, speaking of honeymoon listening, my wife decided to listen to the next story with me, making this her first ever Big Finish story, Auld Lang Syne by Tim Foley, which has instantly leapt up the rankings as one of the best Ninth Doctor stories ever told. It's like the first act of The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, but throughout the entirety of the story, as the Doctor is the caretaker of the Folds house, which the Litherland family visit to celebrate the new year. The Ninth Doctor takes a shine to Mandy, played by Leah Brotherhead, and invites her back to the house free of charge next year, providing she helps him discover the secrets of the house. It's such a small-scale, intimate story with incredible personal stakes, a superb cast of rich characters, and an intriguing central hook as we, along with the Doctor, catch up with Mandy and the Litherland family and learned what happened over the past year through really novel ways. There's real warmth and heart here, and a third act that's just heartbreaking but also really affirming and beautiful. Auld Lang Syne is easily the standout Ninth Doctor story of 2022 and an easy top 5 contender for the year on its own. It has strong competition though, as we now open the next box set, Into the Stars, with another script by Timothy X. Attack, Salvation 9. The Ninth Doctor is attempting to stop a squadron of humans from destroying an outpost teeming with Sontarans because, well, the Sontarans on Salvation 9 are peaceful. Not only that, they've even found a way to procreate without cloning and have even discovered a newfound gender binary. Actor Josie Lawrence joins the species ranks as a female Sontaran. But yeah, Salvation 9 is an absolute hoot. Dan Starkey is on reliably great form as multiple Sontarans, Eccleston is clearly reveling in the fun material and the unconventional premise, culminating in an outstanding set piece which launches the Doctor across an alien battlefield. It's such a triumphant triumphant moment and when Howard Carter's music kicks in. It's so good. Next up we have Last of the Zeta Scene, which is basically Doctor Who meets My Fair Lady, as the Doctor teams up with a working class woman called Nell, played by Alice Feetham, and makes her pretend to be alien royalty while taking part in a high stakes gambling game. It starts really strongly, and the other players in this game are fun and eclectic, including one played by former companion Maureen O'Brien, but it's in the story's second half where it becomes much more conventional, a story about animal conservation and a big spaceship runaround. It's fine, but I think it peaks really early and it loses a lot of that appeal as it goes along. And the last of the set is Break the Ice by Tim Foley, which sees the Ninth Doctor face, and I kid you not, Jack Frost, here imagined as an old god voiced by Pip Torrens. We've got a terrific companion surrogate in Lenny Fisk, played by Thalissa Texera, an astronaut suffering from a lot of trauma and agoraphobia. Now thematically, this story has a lot in common with Station to Station from the last box set, but the space setting adds so much, and like I said, Lenny Fisk is a really compelling character to follow. Outside of The Unquiet Dead, this is the closest that we've got so far to a Ninth Doctor Christmas special. And lastly, we've got Hidden Depths, another solid box set with 3 solid stories, but contrary to the title, none of them are particularly deep. We've got the Ninth Doctor encountering the Sea Devils on the Saturn moon, Titan, in the Seas of Titan by Lisbeth Miles. It plays out very similarly to other Sea Devils or Silurian stories about humanity trying to broker peace with a species that has an ancestral claim to the environment, and while it's got very strong interactions between the Ninth Doctor and the crew working on the outpost, it's nothing too exciting. We do, however, have a very good anti-war historical in Lay Down Your Arms by Lisa McMullen, which is probably my favourite Ninth Doctor historical, as the Ninth Doctor meets Bertha von Suttner, future Nobel Peace Prize winner, and she helps the Doctor stop an alien invasion which talks about the futility of war and actualizes it into the main text of the story. It's not subtle, but that is partly what I admired most about the story, plus the dialogue between Nine and Bertha when he's acting as her singing teacher is just the best.
Shall we begin the lesson?
Right you are. Let's start with a warm-up. You're not joining in!
I'm afraid I don't know that one. Are you sure that's operatic?
Well, how about the one I taught you yesterday? That's definitely operatic.
No go Flotro Woe?
That's the one, Jadoon Opera. Bit staccato, but on the plus side, mercifully short. Every time they start writing one, they arrest themselves for intergalactic crimes against music.
Lastly, we've got the reunion between 8th Doctor companions Liv and Tanya and The Next Incarnation in Flatpack by John Dorney. The A-plot revolving around an alien furniture flatpack store is really effective and utilises the audio medium, specifically the voice casting, in very clever ways. However, if you're attached to these former companions through other Big Finish sets, I can imagine this reunion feeling really lacking, because the same thing happens here as happened with the Brigadier in Old Friends. Obviously, the Time War has happened and it's massively changed the Doctor, and while his old friends can sense it, it's never delved into. I feel like this is leaving so much potential for characterization and interesting stories on the table, and I think that's the best summation of Season 2 of the Ninth Doctor Adventures. There's not a bad story amongst the bunch. In fact, stories such as Auld Lang Syne and Salvation 9 are top tier Doctor Who. However, as a character, it feels like the Ninth Doctor is running in place. A lot of the stories are a bit repetitive, as almost everyone opens with the Doctor appearing out of nowhere and surprising the companion surrogate, which is funny, but it repeats so much it's losing its impact. I think for Season 3 of this range, which has recently been announced, Big Finish either need to give the Ninth Doctor a new full-time companion or move forward in his timeline and have stories with Rose Tyler. Otherwise, the Ninth Doctor, a character that is so well defined on screen due to his arc and his character journey, will just become a novelty in the audio medium as opposed to fully utilising his potential. Anyway, speaking of novelty...
You've got a new face, again, and you're still not Scottish.
Are you sure about that, lassie? I can do Scottish, I'm totally Scottish.
I remember in 2020, there was a couple of weeks where it felt like a new 10th Doctor box set was being announced every single day. We had the Multi-Doctor Trilogy, the River Song box sets, Dalek Universe and Time Lord Victorious, alongside appearances with the War Master, but we'll cover that later. Well, in 2022, we saw the last of those announced projects cross the finish line. Firstly, with Wink by Lisa McMullen, a 6th Doctor and 10th Doctor crossover episode which saw these two incarnations face off against the Weeping Angels.
Even more of me!
The Weeping Angels are invading a perfect planet, Lucidus Silvara, somewhere with 10 suns in the sky, meaning it's so bright you can't see anything. As a result, the species don't have vision, which means the Weeping Angels can move freely without risk of being spotted and frozen. The main selling point of these releases, Out of Time and The Gates of Hell, was the dynamic between the 10th Doctor and his classic predecessors, and Wink is no exception, as we team up two of the most egotistical incarnations and they struggle to work with each other, but when they're working together by the end, it's so satisfying. The Weeping Angels are in great form, and while it's not as good as Out of Time is one of the best one-off Big Finish releases of the past few years, so that's not really a detriment against Wink. Another novelty 10th Doctor release was the box set 10th Doctor Classic Companions, a trilogy of stories where the 10th Doctor, during the 2009 specials presumably, meets Leela, Nyssa and Ace, with Louise Jameson, Sarah Sutton and Sophie Aldred reprising their respective roles. The Doctor is even joined in these adventures by K9. Honestly, this box set was fun, but a bit of a disappointment. Now, the first story with Leela, Splinters by John Dorney, was my favourite of the three, as the Doctor is trying to rescue Leela and a village of people from a supernatural threat called the Spriggan. It took some great twists and turns, but it has the same issue as The Stuntman by Lizzie Hopley, in that it doesn't really reunite the Doctor with these companions, not in a conventional way at any rate. In The Stuntman, Nyssa is living the life of a Hollywood stunt performer, living a different life with different memories. So what's the point in having Nyssa in this story if she's not Nyssa for 90% of it? The Leela reveal is handled much better, but Nyssa really drew the short straw in this box set. The Ace reunion story is solid, however, and I think it showcases the potential of this box set the best, though after The Power of the Doctor, the Ace timeline now is thoroughly incomprehensible. It's a decent novelty set, but I can't fully recommend it. It mainly just feels like an excuse to have the 10th Doctor excitedly shout companion names. Leela! Nyssa! Ace!
Leela! Yes, Nyssa! Ace!
Anyway, moving on.
Oh, good, we've stopped. Valerie, you all right?
I think I'm going to be sick.
Ah, right. Deep breaths. Yes. In.
I know how to breathe.
Right, excellent.
Due to Matt Smith being one of the few Doctors still alive to not lend his voice to Big Finish, there hasn't been that much 11th Doctor material over the past decade. However, in 2021, fans were treated to a full cast audio box set full of adventures from the 11th Doctor, and it was a blast. Building on that foundation, 2022 saw the start of a brand new audio-only story arc for the 11th Doctor, with Jacob Dudman reprising the role and seeing Sophia Ingar be brought on board as a new companion, a part cyborg rig worker from the 54th century named Valerie. These 4 box sets, with 3 stories apiece, essentially making for a brand new season of the 11th Doctor, takes place during the period where the Doctor is travelling alone, searching for Clara midway through Series 7. It starts with Geronimo, which sees the 11th Doctor trying to stop a plague on Research Rig 6, a series of events which leaves Valerie with basically no one else in her life, and the Doctor recruits her as a companion in search for Clara. This is a great box set with some really fun stories, especially the end by Roshana Patel, which plays with timey-wimey split timeline concepts, but Geronimo as a whole is mainly a launching off point for a new Doctor companion dynamic, and Valerie is absolutely terrific. She's down to earth and knowledgeable about technology, but she has an emotional sensitivity beyond her years. She's also not met anyone remotely like the Doctor, and will often indulge his behaviour compared to on-screen companions like Amy and Clara trying to dissuade his erratic tendencies. I also think Sophia Ingar's performance and chemistry with Dudman is spot on, and it's great to see them fit so well as a companion who we'll likely never see on screen. The story arc of this new side series isn't just being driven forward by the search for Clara, however. There seems to be another force at play here trying to bring down the Doctor, with it hinted at it being another Time Lord, or at the very least, someone with access to Time Lord technology. At time of writing this video, we're halfway through the series, and it's great to see it go from strength to strength. Also, a brief mention of the other 11th Doctor story this year, the winner of the Paul Spraggs Memorial Competition, where fans can submit short trip story ideas to Big Finish, with the winner getting their story produced. The winner this year was Nick Slowick's The World Tree, a 40-minute story narrated by Lisa Bowerman that centres around Nora Wicker, an elderly woman in the early stages of dementia who has an alien bush in her garden that the Doctor has to try and fix. I won't say much, except it's really good and it's available for free on the Big Finish website. Check it out. Now, next up, let's go through all the Big Finish adventures this year that starred the 12th Doctor.
That's really offensive. No wonder everyone keeps invading you.
Okay, that's a bit extreme. Whilst 2021 gave us the terrific Time Jacked, starring Jacob Dudman as the 12th Doctor, The Angry Scotsman only had one story this year, an audio novel written by Jonathan Morris and read by Dan Starkey, called Emancipation of the Daleks. I've not read it, I've heard it's pretty good. Okay, so this video is taking so much longer to put together than I thought it would, but that's all 12 Doctors in Big Finish box sets in 2022. But obviously, that's not all of the ranges or releases from this past year, so let's go through the rest, but at a much quicker pace. Torchwood. Confession time. I've been listening to Big Finish for a couple of years, but I never dived into the Torchwood range properly. It's hard enough affording and keeping up to date with other releases, but the Torchwood range has had monthly releases for several years now, and I would pick up the occasional release, like the ones that directly affected the Doctor Who universe. In particular, there was one release I really liked, and it featured Sophie Aldred as Ace, and that was The Red List, and now we've got a follow-up story in 2022. Also, side note, from now on, Big Finish is sending me review copies, so I'll be able to cover the monthly range in my live streams and in other videos, so I'll be more comprehensive in future. But for now, for 2022, let's talk about Mr. Colchester. John Colchester is a Big Finish original character voiced by Paul Clayton, and I can't really tell you much about him because I've not properly listened to the range, as I just explained. However, I was introduced to him in The Red List and in this year's sequel story, Death in Venice. Big Finish also made the short story, A Postcard from Mr. Colchester, available for free. And this story, written by James Goss, is a wonderfully written and sardonic 20 minutes, which gets you into the jaded character's headspace. Anyway, Death in Venice is essentially the franchise's Aliens equivalent to the Red List's Alien, where this is a much bigger, more ambitious story with more action and set pieces, as Colchester and Ace find themselves under assault from unknown, masked assailants in Venice. There's a bike chase, boat chases, a climax, and a secret underground lair, all that good stuff. While I preferred the Red List mainly due to its restrictions and its unconventional ending, Death in Venice was a fun continuation, and I'd be really happy to hear Paul Clayton and Sophie Aldred team up every year. Towards the end of 2022, I got a review copy of several Torchwood stories, but only got around to listening to one, Torchwood SUV, which sees Toshiko and Yanto trapped inside the Torchwood SUV in the Welsh countryside as an alien mist starts to surround them. It's an unabashed bottle story where two characters have to put aside their conflicts in a confined setting, but I did really enjoy it. There's no prerequisite either, so I can safely recommend this story for those who like their stakes low and their drama high. Also, the SUV talks, and it's really cool. Okay, the other ranges, in no particular order.
Childhood threats indeed. You want to know my favourite? Zagreus sits inside your head. Zagreus lives among the dead. Zagreus sees you in your bed.
Don't do that.
A surprise early on in 2022, the Peladon box set is a quadrilogy of stories centering around the planet of Earth. No, I'm just kidding, it's Peladon. There's 4 standalone stories taking place at different eras of the planet's history, with the first one following David Troughton as King Peladon, the second having River Song infiltrate the court of Queen Thalia, the third following the 6th Doctor and Mel trying to stop the planet from falling into environmental collapse.
Even more of me!
And the last one taking place in Peladon's future, with the 8th Doctor attempting to course correct the planet's fate by showing Arla, the last of Peladon's great seamstresses, the truth at the society's underbelly. It's a really eclectic box set that almost Christmas carols its way through the history of Peladon. The world building is top notch, and the character dynamics between pairings like River Song and Alpha Centauri make for really refreshing listening. The standout here though is the truth of Peladon, and not just because it has Paul McGann singing the Venusian lullaby in the credits, but because it's a really effective political analysis of how these systemic issues are maintained, often invisibly. I've not heard many 8th Doctor stories where he's this enigmatic figure of time and space, but this was such a good feel for the 8th Doctor. Overall though, I did like Peladon a lot. It was a real surprise. While we're talking about multi-Doctor box sets, let's go to Classic Doctors and New Monsters Volume 3, The Stuff of Nightmares, a quadrilogy of stories with the 3rd, 4th, 6th and 8th Doctors, along with companions Sarah Jane, Leela, Mary and Charlie facing off against the Hawks of Balhoun, a Tivolian and the Dream Crabs in separate stories. It's a cool range, though you get the sense that Big Finish are running out of memorable villains from the revived series to make these box sets with. The best one of these, however, is The Tivolian Who Knew Too Much by Robert Valentine, where the 4th Doctor and Leela get caught up in 1970s Rome, and it's a full-blown Hitchcockian thriller as the two need to protect a Tivolian who is in possession of a data chip that could end the world. It's so fun, it's frenetic, and there are some really clever subversions regarding what we know about Tivolians in the first place. The rest of the stories are good, but that one is the clear standout of this set, in my opinion. Right, so those are the Doctor-centric box sets. Let's take a look at companion ones, starting with the 8th of March 2, Protectors of Time, Big Finish's release for International Women's Day. 3 stories which team up many prominent women in the Doctor Who universe. We've got a story with Romana and K9 in E-Space trying to ensure a future for the Tharils, a full-blown heist with Lady Christina and Jenny, the Doctor's daughter, and an environmental-themed story which sees Jo Jones team up with Rani Chandra and Unit Science Officer Jack. I've listened to so much Big Finish this year, oh my god, so this one kind of got lost in the shuffle for me. I remember liking it, but I couldn't really tell you much about it. I remember liking the Christina and Jenny story, but you know, apart from that, it's been over a year since it came out, I don't recall much. I'm sorry, I'm only human. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got Volume 10 of the Diary of River Song, Two Rivers and a Firewall, one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. You see, while I love the start and the end of River Song's journey in the TV show, I felt like she was a character with diminishing returns, so I was a bit reluctant to get into her Big Finish adventures. However, Two Rivers and a Firewall, my introduction to the range, was a rollicking good time. The big selling points of this box set are twofold. Firstly, we've got an alternate version of River Song played by Mimi Kaisa, who's making her Big Finish debut. Whether or not she's from an alternate universe or a different incarnation, I think it's left ambiguous. I don't know exactly, but either way, it doesn't really matter. And the other selling point was the return of Proper Dave, played by Harry Peacock from Series 4 of Doctor Who, and this is the furthest point we've seen so far in the River Song timeline. It's about her life in the library's afterlife. Both adventures are great, with both rivers getting caught in an Indiana Jones-style timey-wimey archaeology adventure, and the Firewall story is a fun jaunt in this afterlife with a glitch in the system. However, the best story from this set is the Auton one, Black Friday. The Autons are a strange villain to depict in audio because, well, they can't speak, but they're put to great use here, in a story where River Song is trapped on a shopping planet with a sole survivor, Mikhail, played by Paul Baisley. We see a friendship bloom, apocalyptic stakes, and a killer ending. Black Friday is the clear standout of the box set. It's superb, but don't sleep on Lizzie Hopley's beauty on the inside, where River Song meets a royal family who are trying to become immortal. This was a great set. Another big surprise this year was the sequel to the Rose Tyler Dimension Canon box set from 2019. Billy Piper, Camille Coduri and Mark Benton, they returned to reprise their roles and continue the adventures of Rose Tyler in Pete's world, attempting to find the Doctor as the stars are starting to go out. To the uninitiated, these box sets sound like a parody spin-off idea. However, I've got to be honest with you, the first box set, which also stars Sean Dingwall, was really good. In fact, some of the stories are downright heartbreaking, as all of these universes that Rose visits are on the brink of destruction as well. She has to watch these alternate versions of her family face the end of their respective worlds, and she can't stick around to help. Dimension Canon 2, Other Worlds, may not be as strong as the first set, mainly because it's lost the element of surprise, but it was still an affecting trilogy of stories that ends on a great cliffhanger, leading into part 3 for release release in September 2023. There's some really cool concepts in this box set, including an alien threat that is stealing the salt from Earth's oceans, a world where technology never advanced beyond the Dark Ages, but apparently the Doctor is here, and an Earth where Jackie Tyler is a famous TV star whose version of Rose has become estranged. Billie Piper is especially great in that last story, by the by. Obviously, I think the box set is a hard sell, but I do recommend at least checking out the first one, and if you liked it, pick this one up. Okay, we're nearly done. Let's see what those pesky Time Lords are up to. The last installment of the Gallifrey Time War series saw a status quo shift. Rassilon, played by Richard Armitage, who I have dubbed Hot Rassilon, is starting to consider the final sanction. The Dalek Emperor is losing its mind, and Romana has been banished into a pocket dimension, leaving Leela to try and fight the good fight on her own. This year saw a rebranding of the Gallifrey range, continuing the Time War under a new banner, Gallifrey War Room, with Volume 1 Allegiance picking up where the last set left off. Now, the Gallifrey range has a very committed following, so I don't need to tell them whether or not to pick up this set because they've already pre-ordered all of the upcoming volumes. These Big Finish Gallifrey stories have been going on for nearly 20 years. You're either into the idea or you're not. These stories centre around Leela being forced to work for the Time Lords in their new war room, as she tries to find a way out of the war and also betray Rassilon before he can destroy the whole of creation. We also have the return of Caroline Pickles playing a younger incarnation of Cardinal Elistra, played previously by the late great Jacqueline Pearce. Now, as a box set, I think it peaks really early. The Last Days of Freem by Lou Morgan does a really effective job at recalibrating the series to establish the new status quo, whilst also giving Leela a really compelling first mission with a really clever ending that tests Leela in every way. I think she's such a brilliant lead for these stories because Leela is incorruptible. She's like the Captain America of the Doctor Who universe, where just her presence and inherent good influences and affects almost everyone around her. Unfortunately, the box set for me took a bit of a downturn with the other stories, with the third story, Collateral Victim, feeling like there was some full-blown scenes missing. There were even some I believe to be outtakes and line flubs that were still left in the released version. Thankfully, the last story of the box set brings it home, The First Days of Phaedon by Sophie Isles, which is the most Dalek-heavy of the box set, though I have no idea who these Daleks are on the front cover. It's a really cool story, where the Daleks bring back a planet that was destroyed in the first days of the war, and the Time Lords don't know why. Really cool story, culminating in an Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade style decision from Leela. If you know, you know. Overall, it's a bit of a shaky start for this new range, but the potential is always there, and I look forward to where the War Room sends us next. And lastly for this video, we turn to the villains, specifically the Master. However, Big Finish have 3 incarnations on the go at the moment. Michelle Gomez's Missy did not have a set this year, so let's talk about Eric Roberts instead. The Master! Range got off to a bit of a weak start last year in a box set that teased this version of the Master trying to escape his incorporeal existence in the time vortex after the events of the TV movie. It even teased a crossover between the Master and Vienna Salvatore, played by Chase Masterson, an original character with her own Big Finish range, but it all resulted in a missed opportunity and a crossover that lasted about 3 minutes in a 3-hour box set. Also, hardly any Daleks despite one being on the cover. It was with these low expectations that I went into Master! Nemesis Express, a 3-part story which sees the Master trying to survive on a spaceship called the Kairos, a train that traverses the time vortex. Vienna is also on board and is essentially the main character, along with a young thief named Passion, played by Terry and Bob Baxter. The two try to fight their way through the train to stop the Master from escaping the vortex and also stop him from crashing the ship into Earth. It's a massive improvement from the first box set, with a great dynamic between Vienna and Passion, with Vienna seeing a lot of herself in Passion and wanting to make sure that she does not fall down the same dark path as hers. I've not listened to any of the Vienna box sets, but these box sets do a great job at framing both her and the Master as terrific counters to each other, with Eric Roberts throwing himself back into the role as an incarnation of the Master that is both knowingly campy and also charming, but just as malicious as his other themselves, it's a great performance. It's not quite the Snowpiercer but with the Master that it was sold as, but Nemesis Express is a good time with expertly escalating stakes as it moves along with a really fun supporting cast of characters who you can watch the Master manipulate and then kill in gruesome fashion. And last but certainly not least, we've got Derek Jacobi's War Master, who starred in 2 box sets this year, Self-Defense and Escape from Reality. And oh fun, we've got another 10th Doctor story as well. I was first introduced to this range last year with the Killing Time box set, which saw stories where the Master essentially manipulates and tortures an older Jo Grant and Nyssa, and that box set was messed up but brilliant. It was one hell of an introduction to this range, throw me in at the deep end, and while Self-Defense does not have anything quite as twisted as what happened in Killing Time, it was still a strong 4-parter, which is essentially a redux of the Trial of a Time Lord, except it's the Master who is on trial. You see, the Master is on trial by the High Vector for his crimes against the universe, with the stories being framed around the case for and against him, with the final story revolving around the 10th Doctor being summoned to act as a character witness in his defense. It's a really cool idea. It's just that the 10th Doctor only appears in the final episode. Know that going in. Now, that episode's script by Lizzie Hopley is wonderful, and Derek Jacobi and David Tennant have sparkling scenes where the 2 Time Lords talk morality, where this Doctor is in his respective timeline, and whether or not the Master is worth saving. Just don't go into this box set expecting a fully fledged crossover. Also, it's worth remembering, going into these Master sets, that it's his show and the War Master always wins, usually in the most depraved and violent way possible. These box sets are not for the faint-hearted, and while Self-Defense is one of the milder ones, probably because of the inclusion of the 10th Doctor, it's still really good and goes to dark places. But it's in Escape to Reality, with the Doctor gone, that the Master can play, as he escapes from the Time War into the world of fiction, resulting in a quadrilogy of stories where the Master goes to Greek mythology to try and kill God, the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale The Shadow, and the adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the world of Dorian Gray, the latter 2 starring Big Finish's Sherlock Holmes and Dorian Gray, Nicholas Briggs and Alexander Vlahos respectively. Also, Bern Gorman, who played Owen in Torchwood, he plays Inspector Lestrade. That's a great bit of casting. Now, put these box sets side by side, and I can see why Self-Defense is the most appealing, but my god, I have to put my foot down and say that Escape to Reality is the real deal, with some incredible stories and twists and turns in all 4 parts. Now, I wasn't too hot on the Dorian Gray one, but everything else is a stone-cold classic, where the War Master faces off against Zeus, goes to war with his own shadow, deciding to just ruin its life just because, and in the clear highlight, he steps into the shoes of Sherlock Holmes and takes part in the most brutal act of violence in a Big Finish story this year. My god, I can't even describe what the War Master gets up to here, what he does to Sherlock Holmes, because some viewers may have a queasy stomach. Alfie Shaw, who wrote the story, he must have been watching a lot of South Park recently, I don't know. Either way, bravo Alfie. Okay, and to round off this video, just a bit of clarification. I mentioned earlier that I didn't get around to listening to the other 8th Doctor sets, whether it be the Stranded finale or the Further Adventures of Charlotte Pollard. I also didn't listen to the 12th Doctor novel, Emancipation of the Daleks, or any other audio novels. I also did not listen to the unit sets or the New Adventures of Bernie Summerfield, which featured the last appearance of the late great David Warner as the Unbound Doctor. I also did not listen to the Rory Williams box set, The Lone Centurion Volume 2, Camelot, Short Trips Volume 11, The Robots Volume 5, or the other Torchwood stories. God damn it, Big Finish release a lot. And that's exactly why I made this video, in order to break down the releases and let you know which ones are essential, especially if you're on a budget and only after specific stories or specific incarnations or ranges. With that being said, I compiled all of the 40 sets I listened to this year, narrowed them down into a short list of 20, then I narrowed that down further to make sure there weren't any repeating ranges to give you my top 10 Big Finish box sets for the year of 2022. Counting down, number 10, Doctor Who The Companion Chronicles, The Second Doctor, Volume 3. Number 9, The Diary of River Song Series 10, Two Rivers and a Firewall. Number 8, Doctor Who, The Ninth Doctor Adventures, Back to Earth. Number 7, Doctor Who, The First Doctor Adventures, The Outlaws. Number 6, Doctor Who, The Eighth Doctor Adventures, What Lies Inside, and Connections. I'm sorry, I'm cheating here, I'm combining the two. Number 5, Doctor Who, The Doctor Chronicles, The 11th Doctor, Geronimo. Number 4, Doctor Who, The Fourth Doctor Adventures, Series 11, The Nine. Number 3, Doctor Who, The Sixth Doctor Adventures, Waterworlds. Number 2, The War Master, Escape from Reality. And number 1, Doctor Who, The War Doctor Begins, Battlegrounds. Hey folks, thank you so much for checking out my Big Finish 2022 retrospective video. A big project that's finally out of the way after several delays. Now we can put last year behind us and talk about other things. I know I did a shout out to my Patreon earlier, but I massively appreciate the support of my patrons. You can see their names scrolling down on the screen right now, and I'd like to give a shout out to these particular patrons. Adam Grattan, Alex Dry, Ben Langdon, Callum Baird, Tuba City Blues, Dan the Dreamer Shill, Daniel Davis, Darkstar2189, Darren Carver-Bausiger, Dean Jones, Dr. Hadley, Dragonbugs, Dylan Whitaker, Evil Dalek 79, Finley Rude, Flippant, Ginger Animator, Joseph Adams, Lard Dragon Ezra, Leela, Maria Bergman, Mario Fanboy 15, Matthew Perry, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Nate Harris, Palex, Pat Andrews, Randall Sprinkle, Raven Woods, Reese Lloyd, Ross, Ryan Duncan, Samuel Whitaker, Scott Gerard, The Brit Sniper, The Doctor 14 Blu-ray Reviews, Timbo 1834, Toby Loxton, Will, and William Baker. If you'd like to become a patron, if you'd like to join those names on screen and the ones I just shouted out, all of those links are in the description below, as well as those eBay listings if you're interested in any of the releases I've talked about today. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.